if we begin to build, as the Occupy movement did, effective forms of resistance, we can expect tremendous blowback. Because internally, the corporate state is utterly corrupt and rotten. And the reason that they passed the NDAA is, I believe, is speculation, is because they know that eventually there will be unrest, and they don't trust the police to protect them. And they're right. Police, for whatever egregious acts they carried out in the streets of Oakland or New York or anywhere else during the Occupy encampments, are working class. They have sisters-in-laws who have lost their jobs as school teachers. They have family members who also are living on unemployment, if they're lucky enough to still get unemployment. They're working in New York City for $37 an hour at rent-a-cops at places like Goldman Sachs, watching these guys in $8,000 suits walk by them like they're furniture. You saw it in Zuccotti. The demeanor changed markedly every time the white shirts appeared and every time the white shirts disappeared. And so my energy was put into the Occupy movement rather than the Green Party because it was a movement. And I think if the Green Party has any hope of becoming a credible player, it better do a complete about-face and begin to focus on the kinds of logistics that make resistance possible. Long discussions about the evils of corporate capitalism or showing another film at a college campus, I think, is an utter and complete waste of time. We don't have time for it. And I think that it's clear from the Occupy movement that there are millions of Americans who understand the precarious situation all of us are living in and are ready to respond. And you saw that with the upsurge of popular support for the Occupy movement, which caught the Occupy movement completely off guard. And the fact is that the Occupy movement, when you think about it, was a mainstream movement. It articulated, and we even know that from the polls, it articulated the concerns of the mainstream. Protecting education, creating a credible jobs program, especially targeted at people under the age of 25, forgiving student debt, taking health care out of the hands of corporations, and recognizing that health care is a human right, building a system of universal health care. These were issues that were not marginal issues, not confined to a particular segment of the society, but resonated out across the landscape. And of course, the force that was most frightened of the Occupy movement was the Democratic Party, because the Occupy movement utterly exposed the bankruptcy of the Democratic Party. So, and I'm happy to take some questions. By the way, I apologize for being late. My wife was sick, and so the house, of course, fell into utter chaos. And at the moment that I was supposed to be here, I was in fact with my children in the backyard being the big bad wolf, chasing them around the swing set. And so my day went haywire, but I'm glad I made it, and I'm glad Conrad's over there watching Olivia on her computer. But I think that for me is, that it would dramatically change the relationship that I think traditional Green Party activists often have had. But I think we've really almost got to begin from ground zero. There would have been in Zuccotti or in any of these encampments or now currently in the XL, and of course there's no shortage of civil actions of civil disobedience even within this radius. The power, the collective power of having, I throw this out as an example, I'm not telling you all to go out and buy a bus, but the collective power of having a food bus just show up and offer that kind of physical support would very rapidly begin to translate into the dissemination of the thoughts and ideas that we care about. And I think that for many of us who do care about these issues, we've gone about it completely backwards. We've essentially tried to replicate a system of power that is used by corporate parties, but which is utterly unsuitable for those of us who are trying to build movements. We don't have the resources. We will never have that voice. I don't think we have any more time for seminars. I can't, I engage in acts of civil disobedience. I don't like going to jail. Going to jail is more time than I really want to donate to my government. And yet, I don't think that we have any option left. And I think that, again, if we want to have credibility for what we believe and what we care about, it is going to require us to move out of rooms like these and stand on fences in front of the White House in Lafayette Park and be hauled away by the cops. That's it. That's it. The time for talking's over. We don't have any more time for talking. Now it's about action. And so resistance parties like this one have a historic decision to make. They can either act or they can atrophy into utter irrelevance. Thank you. I don't know more is a perfect example of what I'm talking about. Perfect. And I think part of the problem, I have very limited exposure to the Green Party, but from my limited exposure, is there's too many chiefs. Everybody wants to be a chief. And I think, again, what I liked about the Occupy movement is that it detested that hierarchical form of power, which sucks the lifeblood out of organizations. Now, I'm sure there's some people here who were in the Occupy movement. A 7-hour General Assembly drove me nuts. And yet, when the Occupy movement made a decision, it abided by that decision. And I think that hierarchy, which again is emblematic within the Green Party, it's a failure. It is a grafting of traditional structures of power onto a party for which it is incredibly not unfit. And I don't know more is great. I mean, I love the story about there was a strike, I think it was in San Francisco, I can't remember, at the turn of the century, and so the Wobblies sent like a boatload of workers, supporters, and they were met, at the docks by the city's finest, who were beating the crap out of them, screaming, "Where are your leaders? Where are your leaders?" And they go, "We're all leaders." And I, because I spoke so much about the Occupy movement, I always spoke about them in the third person. They. I mean, I had many members of the Direct Action Committee camped out at my house in Princeton, but I did not want to be a spokesperson for them. I also was very critical of the Black Bloc, which was quite a contentious issue within Occupy, and there were even members of Occupy who were not members of the Black Bloc that felt that I had betrayed them. And I said, look, the moment I, as an intellectual or writer, need to walk through that park and get your adulation, I'm finished. My role is to, as in the most unvarnished way I can, speak the truth, even when that truth is unpopular. That's my role. That's why I don't want to run for office. That's why I don't want to head movements. I have a kind of constitutional allergy to long meetings that comes with growing up in the church. And so, I don't know more is the student movement in Quebec is another one. But I think that if the Green Party is serious about making itself viable, it has to jettison the hierarchy. It has to stop hanging around, talking about the nature of corporate capitalism, or I'm not condemning people in this room because I don't know you, but I'm just giving you a general impression. And it's got to really, every meeting has to be something concrete. And in fact, having covered movements all over the world, everything you care about will come out of focusing on the concrete. In fact, let's go back to the food truck, just because I think it actually is a good idea. all of the effort it would take to creating a food truck and stocking it and getting whatever licenses Chris Christie makes you get before he confiscates your food truck, would itself create the kind of nucleus that you care about and would create the kind of outreach that you need. I mean, imagine what it would mean. Let's take the XL. I mean, those mostly kids up in those trees they don't have any food. I mean, they're living on basically peanut butter and stale bagels from the same people. That's it. Imagine what it would mean just to have, I know the XL is a little far from New Jersey, but a truck show up and hand them out some hot coffee. Don't underestimate the power of that. Not just as a tool to create logistical support, but to begin to build the kind of dialogue and alliances, and I'm talking about political, ideological alliances that will begin to challenge corporate power.
What is to prevent the current emphasis on food trucks and logistics for the government to decimate anybody who participates in that, just as they did the Black Panthers?
Right.
This is nothing.
Okay, let's talk about the Black Panthers, because that's a good example. The Panthers were a bifurcated organization. At the top you had Huey Newton, Eldridge Cleaver, and the other gangsters. At the bottom, and this is something I've had with long discussions with Mumia Abu-Jamal, who I'm about to go see again, you had another Panther movement. That was the movement that was running the breakfast program, living in group houses, had no money, out on the street 12 hours a day trying to sell the Black Panther Party. So the problem with the Panthers was, again, the hierarchical nature of power. And Mumia's experience in the Panthers was very different. I mean, Mumia, at the end, Newton moved everybody to Oakland. I mean, he just went insane. So all the Panthers, and that's what just decimated the Panther movement in New York, created the Black Liberation Army, etc. So Mumia actually went to Oakland, lives in a group house. He never saw Huey Newton. He never saw Brower. He never saw any of these people. And you're right, the Panthers were decimated, and the state knew who to target, which is why they killed Fred Hampton, because he was the best thing the Panthers had. And I can tell you that if the state feels threatened, and right now they don't feel, the Occupy movement scared them. I wouldn't say they felt threatened, but it did scare them. But if they feel threatened, they will employ the violence of the state to take us down. I mean, that's just traditional. And part of the reason why I keep pushing nonviolence is because as a foreign correspondent, I know what special forces do. I've seen them at work. They're death squads. We have 60,000 members of the special forces alone. That's not a game we're going to win. I mean, yeah, of course, if we become effective, the state, as they already are going to attempt to decapitate the movement internally by removing those people who are effective voices. And every time I go in and out of the country, the state sends me a little message. So I just came back from Canada. I land, Homeland Security guy in the computer, and whatever it is on my computer, he knows he can treat me like shit. And the whole demeanor changes to being derisive. And he says, "Why are you coming back from Calgary? You usually come back from Montreal." I said, "Well, no, I don't. I usually come back from Toronto." He said, "Don't talk to me. I have the record in front of me." I said, "Well, the record's wrong. I'm allowed through." But it's a kind of reminder, although not always. I mean, I came back from Italy and I was held for an hour at Newark. For no reason, just held until somebody came over and said to the guy behind the screen, "Tell him he's on a watch, he can go." Yeah, of course. I mean, if they feel threatened, they're going to start playing dirty. That's what they do.
Like that. I think that's really important, but I'm a member of a local Green Party in New Jersey, the Essex Passaic Green Party, And the whole idea of forums, I'd like to challenge a little bit here, because, for example, fracking is awful. It's killing people across the country, making them sick. And there are 13 pipelines coming into the state which people don't know about. They don't even know what fracking is. And our waste, as you know, and everyone knows, is being processed here in New Jersey. So we feel like we want to have a forum on fracking that ends up telling people to challenge the system and commit.
But this totally fits with what I'm saying. Fracking is a concrete issue. The Keystone Pipeline is a concrete issue. These are concrete issues. So you organize around the concrete. Yes, you should organize around fracking, but I would say that if you want credibility as an alternative voice, you better be prepared to go up and get arrested around fracking. Then you're doing exactly what I'm saying I believe we should be doing. Right, but this is exactly what I'm saying. That it's not going around. That's exactly what I'm saying. I mean, every organizational effort should be built around action that is focused on something concrete. Another meeting about, here's our position, and why can't you understand how enlightened we are, is a killer. So I think what you're doing is exactly what I'm advocating. Just keep them short, because I gotta go. Yeah.
There's an important element that you may have your reasons for not mentioning it, but Mike's mentioned Catholics. The trials proved that they were not guilty of anything. The infiltration.
Yeah, no, I know that. But ask the question, because just keep your question. Keep it as a question, because I can't state it.
Okay.
Go ahead. I mean, ask the question. I think the narratives are interesting, but I mean, it's a long discussion.
The infiltration of the FBI was one of the major forces that destroyed the benefit.
Of course. That's what I'm saying. And
how do you deal with that?
You deal with it through transparency. I mean, the only weapon we have is nonviolence and transparency. Now, the problem with the Panthers is that once you employ violence, and we see it with Muslims in this country since 9/11, 90-something plus percent, probably 99% of all Muslims arrested in domestic terrorism plots were totally set up by the FBI. These black bloc anarchists in Cleveland, the 5 kids, totally set up by the FBI. We can't win at that game. You have to go back and read Havel's 1978 essay, The Power of the Powerless. I'm not naive enough to tell you we're going to win, by the way. But I'm telling you that it's the only chance we have. And, in Zuccotti, we knew there were cops all over the fucking place in plain clothes. They'd show up, they lift weights, they wear a baseball hat, they're about 30, they haven't shaved, tell you they went to Reed College, but they forgot their ID. And all they want to know is where the leaders are. So who do you think the leaders are? I mean, after about 5 minutes, they went over to the medical tent and asked some woman, so, who do you think the leaders are here? She said, well, I am. I said, oh, really? I said, oh, what are you in charge of? She goes, everything. She goes, oh, well, what's your title? And she goes, God. Yeah, of course. I mean, of course we're infiltrated. I mean, of course we are. I know Homeland Security is reading my emails, and I'm about to go interview Julian Assange, so I'm sure they're all having a fit. But I don't say anything in private I don't say in public. It's an utter waste of their time. It's an utter waste of taxpayer dollars. But what happens when you build these internal security apparatuses is that they need to justify their own existence, so they descend into the absurd. You saw it in East Germany. You had the Stasi infiltrating stamp collection clubs. That's what you get to, because they need to perpetuate themselves. Keep it a question, because like I'm out of here in about. Just keep it a question.
Okay.
Go ahead. What's the question?
In the interest of Collins just said, how do we educate workers that raising the minimum wage is actually good for corporate America and it actually creates jobs and it frees people from going to college debt?
All right, you're asking about the minimum wage. Raising the minimum wage is a good idea for this reason. The most effective form of political control that is now visited on the poor and the working class is debt. And as anyone who has read Barbara Ehrenreich's great work, nickel and dime, being poor in this country is one long emergency. And the fact that people are so crippled by debt, and because they can't get a job, I mean, the average worker at Walmart works 28 hours a week, and they're still below the poverty line. So the first thing the Walton family does, who are making $11,000 an hour, is they hand these employees applications for food stamps because they qualify. So we're subsidizing the Walton fortune. And building a movement around the raising of the minimum wage is a good idea because it one, gives you an achievable victory. It crosses political lines. I mean, you go to Walmart, it doesn't matter whether they're all charter members of Gun Owners of America, and you tell them you want to raise the minimum wage, especially if it's significant, that has the kind of issue. Again, it goes back to the concrete. If we're not dealing in the concrete, and the Green Party, I think, has spent a lot of time not dealing in the concrete, you're wasting your time, everyone's time. So I'm for anything that fucks the system up. And raising the minimum wage fucks them up, great. Any way we can go, anything we can do, chaining yourself to bulldozers in upstate New York or Pennsylvania that are destroying the water table and fracking, that's anything you can do. Well, in terms of wage issues, it's classic, which are strikes. Obviously, strikes. There was that effort against Walmart. Walmart won. Let's not kid ourselves. Doesn't mean we shouldn't try again. You have fast food workers in New York City who just walked out of their jobs. And boy, when something like that happens, that's where you should be. You should drop everything and be there. And don't start preaching at these people, because the fact is they probably know a lot more than you do. I mean, this is the problem of the left in this country. And I spent 20 years of my life in the developing world. And what it did is it taught me to listen. Shattered a lot of my assumptions. I graduated from seminary. I'll just give you one small example. I graduated from seminary. My father was a minister. And I was in a refugee camp for victims of the war in El Salvador, in Honduras, on the Day of the Innocents, when Herod comes in and kills all the babies, and the angels come and Jesus flies through. And they were decorating the whole camp. These are illiterate campesinos. And I said, well, why is the Day of the Innocents such an important holiday? And this campesino looks at me and goes, because on that day Jesus became a refugee. Now, I could recite that passage from Luke, I remember, and yet I didn't understand it. Because I had never read it through the eyes of a refugee. And part of what I do to keep myself angry is I don't sever my relationship with people who suffer. It's why I teach in prison. Because once you sever that relationship with the oppressed, once oppression becomes an abstraction, you begin to speak nonsense, and you become prey to despair. When you walk out of that prison, and I teach in Wagner, and I'm about to teach up in Rahway, when you walk out of that prison and you see what we've done to these young lives, and you're not angry, something's wrong with you. And I think that that disconnect between the oppressed, that inability on the part of the American left to build real relationships with people who suffer, has denied them any real credibility, and has denied them the possibility of a corrective, and more than one corrective, many correctives that might make it possible for them to begin to respond in an effective way to systems of oppression. All right, let's keep it a question. Let's just do questions.
Comment. How do you handle with companies that force you to sign a contract that virtually makes you an at-will employee? And Sony has done that to a lot of their companies.
How do you handle companies that do what?
You have to sign employment contract.
Yeah.
But in the bottom line of that contract, it virtually makes you an at-will employee giving up your cause.
Well, I signed a contract with a Fortune 500 company called the New York Times and told them to go fuck themselves. So, I mean, there are moments when you have to defy your institution if you're going to stand for anything. I mean, anybody who believes that you can live the moral life and not clash with whatever institution you are working for, including the church, is naive.
That's what the local food, grow your own food.
Yeah, well, you just nailed it. I mean, those are, again, concrete. Local food movements, alternative currency, anything that can begin to sever ourselves from corporate dominance. I mean, that's what local currencies do. I mean, you know, in this whole banking crisis, and part of my frustration with the Greens is that I remained true to Nader in 2008. I wrote several of Nader's policy speeches for him. But in 2008, Ralph Nader said, why are we giving $100 billion to Citibank? Why don't we make 10 regional banks, like in North Dakota, state banks? Why don't we give each bank $10 billion? And then why don't we tell them they can leverage it 10 to 1 if they renegotiate these mortgages in communities where people are losing? Now that makes sense. So any kind of a response that is concrete, you know, and I think that there, you know, part of my frustration with the American left is we don't do much. We talk a lot, but we don't really do much. And I think that in order to regain that kind of credibility, we are going to have to regain that kind of militancy that made figures like Mother Jones, Eugene V. Debs, goes off to prison, and when he's hauled in the prison, all the prisoners are leaning out their windows cheering for him. That kind of militancy that is based around the concrete. And if you know, I come out of the church. We call it a kind of witness. That ability to walk with those who suffer and endure with those who suffer what they endure. To voluntarily accept that kind of oppression is far more effective than trying to tell people how ignorant they are and how they don't understand systems of power.
Chris, what do you think about Jill Stein and Sherry Conklin taking food to the front lines of the KFL hotline and working with the homeless in Philadelphia and getting a message? That's all marketing.
Yeah, I think you know, Sherry especially has a long history of this. I just saw her a couple weeks ago, and I think, you know, she's essentially doing what I'm advocating. But I don't know that that is replicated throughout the party itself. But yes, I think all of those acts are extremely important, and acts that, and again, I want to stress that I think we have, you know, having spent as long as I have, months of my life in places like Gaza. When I was in seminary, I lived for 2.5 years in a housing project in Boston and Roxbury. You learn when you walk into these places, especially as a reporter, that so many assumptions that you carry, however well-meaning those assumptions are wrong. And I think that we constantly need that kind of corrective, which we're only going to get with that kind of intimate relationship if we are going to build a successful movement. And that corrective is almost daily. It's a corrective that one has to constantly hear. Changes that often incremental changes at the moment that become seismic later. And unfortunately, the corporate state has done a very good job of creating this vast distance between the left in this country and the oppressed. And part of it was, of course, channeling energy on the part of the left into boutique activism, which has infected every college campus in this country. Multiculturalism, gender studies, all of which I support, but not when it is divorced from justice. And so it was everything but justice, while the working class in this country was raped, and we did nothing but busy ourselves with gender politics, which is just what they wanted us to do. And we have to reclaim that justice, the fundamental justice, the right of the poor and working men and this women to have a decent standard of living. And we can't be egalitarian or snobs about it. We can't look down on microloan programs. We can't look down even on food banks. I mean, all of the things that I think the left traditionally says is just propping up the system. Because the suffering, having spent the last 2 years in the poorest parts of this country, is very severe. I mean, Pine Ridge, South Dakota, the average life expectancy for a male is 48. That is the lowest in the Western Hemisphere outside of Haiti. At any one time on Pine Ridge, 60% of the dwellings have neither electricity or running water. That's the United States. And of course, courtesy of Viacom, General Electric, Rupert Murdoch's News Corp, Disney, Clear Channel, these people have been rendered utterly invisible, except when we make fun of them. Whether that's on, I don't own a TV, so everything reference I make is dated. Whether that's, what's that shore, Jersey Shore, or Jerry Springer, I don't even know if he's still on the air, but it's all about the only time we see the underclass is when we laugh at them. All right, good luck. Thanks very much.